by the MODIS instruments and is now being made by our operational weather satellites in the US, which are instruments called VEERS, are global fire observations. So what you're seeing here is a map of what we call fire radiative power. That's the intensity of fires all around the world. And if you look at this, you can see changes. This is actually up to date. We keep this running up to date. So this goes all the way through yesterday. And so you can see these global fires, which are a combination of natural influences, but also human activities that cause fires to be set to clear land, in many cases for development, for agricultural purposes. In the United States, we have a crisis of fires increasing in the Western United States, which is drying out. It's more prone to droughts. And so we've seen many of these mega fires, which are harmful both to communities in the path of the fire and communities downwind who can be strongly impacted by air quality. So these continue to be a resource internationally, but something that we use and rely on very heavily in the United States to manage our fires and hopefully mitigate the damage to communities. Most of this presentation is talking about satellite data and models, but I do want to acknowledge that one of the pieces of technology that we do a lot of at NASA, there is another A in there, that's the National Aerospace and Aeronautics and Space Administration. The A is for airborne sensing. And a lot of times before we deploy something into space, we're developing and demonstrating those measurements from airplanes. And so this is one example I particularly like, showing how we make observations of vegetation structure. These are measurements that we've demonstrated from airplanes. They measure both the structure of vegetation and qualities of the chemicals in leaves using a combination of LIDAR and hyperspectral technology. And so you see this beautiful map of the tree canopy. We can actually use these aircraft also to study in more detail regions that have been affected by disasters, to understand how storms and events like hurricanes can damage vegetation and how long it takes for that to regrow. So this is something that's been incredibly important in the United States. And now we're really happy to see some of that technology deployed on the International Space Station. So for years, satellites like MODIS have told us how green the vegetation is around the world, but we never knew ensure that we actually track and quantify carbon stocks. Another new type of measurement that we're making that complements that foundational view that we got from MODIS over the past few decades is one that we call PACE. PACE was launched almost a year ago. It's still one of our youngest satellites. And what's really exciting about PACE is it's making a measurement that we call hyperspectral remote sensing. So hyperspectral just means it's able to see in many, many more wavelengths than a satellite like MODIS could that was launched several decades ago. What's important about that is that the MODIS instruments could really only tell us the general of the ocean, how much chlorophyll was in the ocean. It couldn't tell us details of phytoplankton composition, what kinds of plants were growing. Because of all of the detail that satellites like PACE have, I'll restart this and you'll see this is the traditional view we had from a satellite like MODIS. And by the way, this is home to me. I'm based just outside of Washington, D.C., so the Chesapeake Bay is very close to home. And here you're seeing some of the coastal regions there. And what you see is in that transition, going from total ocean color to actually the species of these tiny little plants and animals in the water. That's giving us much more detailed information about the marine food web. It also gives us information about aerosol particles in the atmosphere. So this is part of the next generation of remote sensing from NASA, which is giving us not just global coverage, but much more detail about the processes that affect